Every Buddhist text you have ever read begins with the same 4 words. They are not the Buddha's. They belong to a man who memorized 60,000 words of teaching, served the Buddha for 25 years, and on the night it mattered most, could not use a single one. Remembering is not the same as letting go. His name was Ananda, the Buddha's cousin, personal attendant, and the reason you can read a single line of Buddhist scripture today. He is also the most important person in Buddhism who never got enlightened. Until the night he stopped trying. These are 10 lessons from a life spent holding the light for someone else. Lesson 1. Serve without wanting credit. When the Buddha was 55 years old, he asked the Sangha for a permanent attendant. Monks volunteered. Ananda did not. He waited until he was asked directly, and then he did something no one expected. He set 8 conditions. 4 of them were refusals. He would not accept the Buddha's robes. He would not accept the Buddha's food. He would not share the Buddha's dwelling. He would not attend private meal invitations meant for the Buddha. He wanted nothing that could look like privilege. The other 4 conditions were requests, but not for himself. He asked to bring visitors to the Buddha at any time. He asked to present questions from anyone in the community. He asked to hear any teaching he missed while away. And he asked the Buddha to repeat any discourse given in his absence. Look at those 8 conditions. 4 walls against personal gain. 4 doors for other people's access. That is not a job description. That is a blueprint for how to serve without making the service about you. And for 25 years, he never broke a single one. He dressed the Buddha's sleeping quarters. He carried messages between monasteries. He sorted disputes among monks. He organized robes, food, and logistics for a community that sometimes numbered in the thousands. The texts say he never once had a thought of resentment during his entire service. Not once in 25 years. You have probably resented your coworker for breathing too loudly by Tuesday. But here is the detail that matters. He asked for nothing except access to the teaching. And for 25 years, he remembered every word. He could recite 60,000 words of discourse without error. 15,000 stanzas of verse. The Pali texts call him Dhamma Bandhagarika, treasurer of the Dhamma, not memorizer, not recorder, treasurer. The word implies custody, responsibility, trust. He held the key to the entire vault of the Buddha's teaching. And he never spent a coin. Lesson 2. Grief is not failure. The Buddha was 80 years old, lying on his right side, between 2 sala trees in a grove outside the town of Kusinara. The monks had gathered. Some sat in silence. Some recited verses about impermanence, the correct doctrinal response to death. Ananda did not recite anything. He walked to the back of the building, found a door frame, and grabbed it with both hands. And he wept. The text says he wept because he knew. He knew that his teacher, the person who had answered every question he had ever asked, who had never once turned him away, who had called him the finest attendant any Buddha had ever had, was about to disappear, and he was not ready. He said it out loud. I am still a learner. I am still on the path, and the master who was so kind to me is about to pass away. The Buddha heard that Ananda was missing. He sent a monk to find him. And when Ananda came back, the Buddha did not tell him to stop crying. He did not say, pull yourself together. He did not quote doctrine. He said, Ananda, you have attended me for a long time, gladly, sensitively, sincerely, without reservation. You have made great merit. Keep practicing, and you will soon be free. That is not a rebuke. That is a father telling his son, you are closer than you think. The Pali word for what Ananda was at that moment is sekha, one in training, not failure, not unenlightened, a learner. The word carries dignity. It says you are not broken, you are unfinished, and unfinished is not the same as lost. Lesson 3. Stand up even when the room says no. Years earlier, the Buddha's foster mother, Mahapajapati Gautami, came to him with a request. She wanted to be ordained. She wanted women to enter the Sangha. The Buddha said no. She asked again. He said no again. She asked a third time. He said no a third time. Ananda watched this happen, and then he did something that would define his legacy and eventually be used against him. He stepped forward. He asked the Buddha a question. Are women capable of attaining arahantship, full enlightenment, if they go forth from home into homelessness? The Buddha said yes. Then Ananda made his second argument, and this one was not doctrinal. It was personal. Mahapajapati nursed you at her own breast when your mother died 7 days after you were born. She raised you. He was not citing scripture. He was reminding the Buddha of a debt. The Buddha established the order of nuns. This is the lesson most people miss about Ananda. He was not passive. He was not just a secretary with good memory. When the room said no, when the most powerful teacher in the ancient world said no 3 times, Ananda found a way in. And the door he opened changed the history of an entire religion. Half the ordained Buddhists who have ever lived walked through a door that Ananda pried open with 2 sentences. He would pay for it later. But that is lesson 8. Lesson 4. You do not know what you do not know. One afternoon, Ananda sat with the Buddha and listened to a teaching on dependent origination, Paticca Samuppada, the chain of conditions that gives rise to suffering. When the Buddha finished, Ananda nodded. He said, "This seems quite clear to me, sir. It does not seem so difficult." The Buddha turned to him. Do not say that, Ananda. Do not say that. This teaching is profound and difficult to see. An entire people could live their whole lives entangled in it like a matted thread, like a bird's nest of reeds, and never find their way out. Ananda had heard the words. He had memorized them perfectly. He could have the entire teaching back without a single error. And the Buddha looked at him and said, "You do not understand this at all. It is the difference between reading a recipe and tasting the food." Ananda had the recipe memorized, every ingredient, every measurement, every step, and he had never once turned on the stove. This is the moment the gap opens, the gap between knowing and becoming. Ananda would spend the next 2 decades standing in that gap, holding 60,000 words he could recite but could not live, and the weight of that gap would nearly destroy him. We are halfway through Ananda's story. The first 4 lessons were about what he built, his service, his grief, his courage, his blind spot. The next 6 are about what he lost, a friendship he underestimated, a hint he missed that he would carry for the rest of his life. The moment 60,000 memorized words became useless, and the night he finally let go of all of them. If this is landing for you, subscribe. Because every video on this channel takes one piece of the Buddha's teaching and shows you what it actually means for your life right now. Drop a comment and tell me which lesson has hit you hardest so far. Now, lesson 5. Lesson 5. Friendship is the entire path. Ananda was walking with the Buddha one morning when he turned and said something that sounded like a compliment. It occurs to me, sir, that good friendship, having good companions, good associates, this must be half of the holy life. The Buddha stopped walking. Do not say that, Ananda. Do not say that. Good friendship is not half of the holy life. It is the entire holy life. Think about what is happening here. Ananda, the man who served the Buddha every day for decades, tried to be modest about it. He called friendship half the path. And the Buddha corrected him. Not because he was wrong about friendship, because he was underselling it. The Buddha was telling Ananda, the thing you already do, the loving, the caring, the showing up, that is not the side dish. That is the meal. You are already doing the most important thing. You just do not see it. This might be the kindest thing the Buddha ever said to Ananda. And Ananda memorized it perfectly. and he still did not hear it. Lesson 6. The hint you missed will haunt you. Near the end of the Buddha's life, the two of them sat together at the Kapala shrine near Vesali. The Buddha said, "Ananda, whoever has developed the 4 bases of spiritual power could, if asked, remain alive for an entire age." An entire age, Ananda. He said this. Then he paused. Then he said it again. Then he paused. Then he said it a 3rd time. 3 times the Buddha told Ananda, "I can stay. All you have to do is ask." Ananda said nothing. The texts say his mind was ensnared by Mara, clouded, distracted, unable to hear what was being offered. He did not ask. The Buddha let the silence stand, and then he released his will to live. The earth shook. Thunder broke across a clear sky. Ananda finally asked, "What just happened?" The Buddha told him, and then he told Ananda what he had missed. "You had your chance. You did not take it. If you had asked, I would have stayed." Imagine carrying that. Imagine knowing that the person you loved most in the world offered to stay alive, and you did not hear them because your mind was somewhere else. You have had this moment. Someone you loved said something. At a dinner table, in a hospital room, in the last phone call before they were gone, and you did not hear it until it was too late. Ananda carried this for the rest of his life, not as guilt, as a lesson. Presence is not the same as proximity. You can sit next to someone for 25 years and still not be there. Lesson 7. Memory is not wisdom. After the Buddha died, Ananda was alone with 60,000 words. He could recite any discourse on command. He could reproduce 15,000 verses without error. He held more of the Buddha's teaching in his head than any human being who has ever lived, before or since, and he was not enlightened. There is a line in the Dhammapada that could have been written about him, like one who counts another's cattle, yet has not a share of his own. Ananda had counted every cow, named every cow, remembered the color and temperament of every cow, and he owned nothing. The vault was full. The treasurer was empty. The community knew it. His fellow monks knew it. Mahākassapa, the elder who would lead the council to preserve the Buddha's teaching after his death, looked at Ananda, the man who held every word, and saw a man who had not yet crossed over, a spoon sitting in the soup for 25 years, never once tasting it. This is the lesson that hits closest to now. You live in the age of information. You can read every Buddhist text ever translated before breakfast. You can listen to 100 hours of Dharma talks on your commute. You can memorize the Eightfold Path, the 5 aggregates, the 12 links of dependent origination, and explain all of them clearly to a stranger. And none of it, not one word, is a substitute for sitting down, closing your eyes, and actually doing the work. Ananda is the patron saint of everyone who has ever read 10 books about meditation without meditating once. There is a meditation teacher who wrote recently, "I can be spaciously attuned to my students. I am pretty good at sorting through the answers, and I am scared my personal practice is not good enough. I am not awake enough." He teaches people how to cross a river he is not sure he has crossed himself. Ananda would recognize that man immediately. Lesson 8. Let them judge you. The first Buddhist council was called 3 months after the Buddha's death. 500 monks gathered in a cave outside Rajagaha to recite and verify every teaching before it was lost. There was one condition for entry. Every monk present had to be an arahant, fully enlightened. Ananda was not. Mahākassapa, the strict elder who led the council, told Ananda he could not attend. But they needed him. He was the only person alive who had heard every discourse. So the council waited. And while they waited, Mahākassapa prepared something else, 5 charges. He accused Ananda of enabling women's ordination, of stepping on the Buddha's robe while mending it, of allowing women to weep over the Buddha's body after death, of failing to ask the Buddha which minor rules could be abolished, and of failing to ask the Buddha to extend his life at the Kapala shrine. 5 charges, in front of 500 monks, against the man who had given 25 years of his life to the Buddha without accepting a single robe in return. Ananda could have fought. He could have argued that women's ordination was right, and history proved him correct. He could have pointed out that the Buddha himself never called these offenses. Instead, he said, "I confess these things, not because I see them as offenses, but in faith of the opinion of the venerable elder monks." He chose the community over his ego. He surrendered his pride. Not because Mahakassapa was right, because the Sangha mattered more than being right. And that night, alone in his cell, he tried the only thing he had not tried in 25 years. He stopped. Lesson 9. Surrender is not a posture. The night before the first council, Ananda sat alone. 500 monks were inside the cave. He was outside, the only one who had not crossed over, the only one who could not enter, and the only one they could not start without. He meditated walking. He meditated sitting. He meditated standing. He did everything he had ever been taught. Every technique, every method, every instruction he had memorized across 25 years and 60,000 words of perfect recall. He applied them all, and nothing happened. Hours passed. His body ached. His mind circled and circled the same territory it had circled for decades. The teachings, the words, the frameworks, the lists, the chains, the aggregates, the paths, all of it there, all of it perfectly organized, all of it useless. And then he gave up, not the dramatic giving up of someone who storms out of a room, the quiet giving up of someone who has simply run out of ways to try. He decided to lie down, not to meditate, not to practice, just to rest, because he had nothing left. And somewhere between standing and lying down, in none of the 4 traditional meditation postures, in no prescribed position, following no technique, Ananda became an arahant. The texts say it happened in the space between one posture and the next, not sitting, not standing, not walking, not lying, somewhere in between, somewhere in the gap where effort ends and control has not yet resumed, the place where you are not doing anything at all. It was not concentration. It was not memory. It was not effort. It was the absence of all 3, 25 years of perfect service, 60,000 words of flawless recall, the 5 charges, the locked door, the grief at the door jamb, the hint he missed at Kapala. None of it was wasted. All of it was necessary. But none of it was sufficient. The last thing required was the one thing Ananda could not do on purpose. He had to let go of the trying itself. Neuroscientists have a name for this. They call it incubation. The phenomenon where the brain solves a problem only after conscious effort stops. The default mode network, that restless background hum of the mind, reorganizes information when you stop forcing it into categories. Breakthroughs in mathematics, in music, in language, they arrive in the shower, on a walk, in the moment before sleep, not during effort. After it, the brain needs the effort first. It needs you to load the problem completely, push every tool you have against it, and fail. And then it needs you to stop. Ananda loaded the problem for 25 years. He pushed every tool he had against it for an entire night. And then his body made the decision his mind could not. It stopped. A woman on a 10-day silent retreat wrote that on the 7th day, she simply could not meditate anymore. She stopped trying, and in that moment realized there was no one there to meditate. The seeker had been the obstacle the entire time. He entered the cave the next morning. The 500 monks saw him and knew. He sat down and he began to speak. "Thus have I heard, Eva me sutam," the first words of every sutta in the Pali Canon. The frame that holds every teaching, not the Buddha's voice, Ananda's. He had been the frame the entire time. And the frame had finally stopped, trying to be the painting. Lesson 10. You are the frame, Every sutta in the Pali Canon begins with the same words, Evam me suttam, thus have I heard. That is not the Buddha speaking, that is Ananda. Every teaching, every discourse, every instruction the Buddha ever gave to anyone, you are hearing it through the voice of a man who spent 25 years holding the light for someone else. He is never credited. His name does not appear in the title. He is the frame around every painting in the museum. And nobody walks into a museum to admire the frames. But without the frame, the painting falls off the wall. That is what Ananda's life teaches. You do not have to be the painting. You do not have to be the one who gets enlightened first, who gets recognized, who gets the title. You can be the one who holds the teaching so carefully that it survives 2,500 years. You can be the one who stands up for what is right and gets blamed for it. You can be the one who weeps at the door jamb and gets called a learner instead of a failure. You can be the frame. But here is what the frame must eventually learn. A musician named Charlie Parker once said, "First perfect your instrument, then just play." Ananda perfected his instrument for 25 years. He tuned it, polished it, carried it everywhere the Buddha went. And on the last night, he finally stopped tuning. He just played. So here are your 10 lessons. 1. Serve without wanting credit. 2. Grief is not failure. 3. Stand up even when the room says no. 4. You do not know what you do not know. 5. Friendship is the entire path, not half of it. 6. The hint you miss will haunt you, so be present now. 7. Memory is not wisdom. 8. Let them judge you. 9. Surrender is not a posture. 10. You are the frame. And the identity reframe is this. You are not the person who has not arrived yet. You are the person who has been carrying the teaching the whole time. The only thing left is to stop tuning and start playing. Which of these 10 lessons hit closest to where you are right now? Tell me in the comments. And if this video gave you something you did not have before you pressed play, subscribe. Every video on this channel takes one piece of the Buddha's teaching and shows you what it actually means for your life today. Every sutta begins the same way. Thus have I heard. Now you know whose voice that is, and you know what it cost him to finally hear it himself.